game for quite a while. It's going to take them a while to get into the action. And it's just such a simple thing to do, and it's very common, but it has a big effect on the game. And once again, it's especially effective against relatively slow opponents like foot orcs or some of these. So, Tyranids is another one that comes to mind. It's a good way to do that. So, people who would otherwise overwhelm you with their numbers, it's a way to counteract that. It's a way to make sure that locally you have the advantage in numbers, even though I may have a much lower model count than the other guy does. So that's kind of those two tactics. So again, refused flank is when you initially deploy all on one side, and therefore ensuring that part of the enemy is going to be out of the game. And then the oblique is where you initially deploy all the way across, but you use your speed either with scout moves or on turn one to concentrate on that. So that's it for that.
I'm right here. And I think that's I think you're critical because you're forcing your whole army, whatever, 1,000 points, 1750 or whatever, against half of their army, and you're making them, force, you're making them to adjust. And works and stuff like that cannot catch up.
I've got a kind of a question.
Sure.
So, with every move, there's a counter. What do you do for your first turn to go against?
If you're a player?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So initially, this is part of the reason why going second isn't so bad, is because you can see how the opponent deploys first, and you can sort of see that coming. So let's say I'm going first, and I deploy all my guys in this box. Well, the refuse flank isn't going to work then, because then, all right, you see he's right over in this box. I'm going to put all my guys right here, and all of a sudden you've lost that advantage. So part of the first turn choice can serve to counteract that. Part of the other thing is don't take all slow units. Is another counter. Is that part of the built-in disadvantage of horde armies is that they're slower to bring the force to bear.
That's a good tactic. Take good units.
Well, I'm out. That's all I need.
That's what I've been doing wrong. I've been taking the crap units. I gotta sell my spawn.
Yeah, yeah, the spawn are pretty fast, so there you go. But in all seriousness, part of the disadvantage of these horde armies is that you can do this against them. But they have a lot of other built-in advantages too, in that they're so durable, they're so tough, they're not going to run away, things like that. So even though you're fighting against half of the orc army, that doesn't mean you're going to win the game. That's just that's just something you can do to even the odds. If I throw my Dark Elder army into an orc horde, I'm going to lose every time. That's not how you're supposed to do it. I'm supposed to do stuff where I move to one side and and dip and dodge and that sort of thing. But that's a great question, and you're right. To every tactic there is a counter. There's other things you can do.
Regarding this setup, would you go one way or the other versus, the guns versus the infantry? Does it matter at this point?
I actually just picked these units at random to put them down here, but basically, you can't get out of range of the ludus, whichever way you go, 48 inches. Maybe if I hug this board edge, I can get some of them out of range, but in general, you want to go for those guys, because these dudes you can outrange, and also they're an assault element, so if they don't catch you, you're not doing their maximum damage. So go straight for the shooters, because they're going to hit you no matter what. So if you come over, if I move everyone over here, I haven't accomplished much, because they're still in the game, they're still shooting me. Whereas if I move all the way over there, well, then I've accomplished my goal, because they're out of the picture.
Right,
so,
of course.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
What if it wasn't orcs you were fighting? What if it was like the Dark Eldar Terminator army?
The Dark Angels.
Dark Angels, that's what I meant, sorry. And half their army deep strikes in first turn. How would you counter that? Let's say this was the idea you had in mind, and he goes ahead and he's like, well, I'll beat you. So just start dropping.
So he initially doesn't deploy anything. He's just he's up there waiting.
He's second deployment, and that's what he decides to do.
Yeah.
How would you counter that?
Well, you wouldn't use either of these tactics against him. Then that doesn't apply. These are when they're deploying on the board when you're deploying.
I just thought of that.
You've got that's a good question. And you have options there too. You can go all reserve as well. Just then make him teleport down, and you can come on as well, and use your speed to make sure that you can outmaneuver him, because he can't land next to you then if you're not on the board. And then he lands over there. You can come on this side, that sort of thing.
Well, I mean,
follow up though. Where's my prize?
Where's your prize? Jay, give him that prize.
How's he get a prize when I'm the person that asked the first question? I see how it goes. Okay.
You gotta ask.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll remember that next time.
If you're the orc player, in this scenario, you're playing the Eldar and you're not deployed, would you then concentrate all your army in one area to take away that advantage of him being able to flank you?
Well, if you deploy all in one area, then it's true that he won't be able to engage part of you at once, and that is a possible counter. However, it really depends on the mission. If it's objectives, and the objectives are spread out everywhere, well, you don't have the luxury of concentrating your forces like that. You're forced to make sure you can cover multiple portions. if it's kill points, that might be a good option, because then if you just hide the whole game, then it doesn't hurt you or help you, so you can ensure that he can't pick you apart by staying all together. Another thing you can do too is just where you deploy your units. Like, you know, like we were saying how all the shooting guys are on that side, right? Well, if you deploy them right in the middle, then there's nowhere I can go that I'll be out of range of them. So this tactic won't affect that unit, basically. So it's true that I'll probably be able to eliminate, you know, those guys from doing something for the first 3 turns, but I'm not eliminating an entire flank at that point. So positioning your shooting unit centrally has an advantage as far as that goes too.
And I think one of the key things is, let's say Ben decides to go up this flank, try to stay away from the Ludas. Well, he's going to get cover saves. I mean, that's one of the critical things. You're shooting all the way across the board like that, you know.
That's true. That's true. And you might be able to outrange some of them, but in general, I would rush the shooting guys.
Yep.
It's pretty basic ideas.
And then they just have less attacks, they're easier to kill, you know. So.
Yep. Do you want to go to the next one?
I have another
Yeah,
question.
sure.
What if this orc player decides to have 2 units of the Ludas, one on each side of the board?
Right. That's a good idea. Yeah, because then that means that
That
no matter
would
where you go,
neutralize your...
in this, yeah, and that's a good idea. I mean, it wouldn't neutralize the deployment in general. It just makes it not so black and white. I mean, there still may be value to doing this because, sure, those Luda units will be in the game no matter what you do, but there might be a boy squad and another kill a can over there, things like that. I mean, rarely is it so black and white that you have the luxury of an entire flank of the army is eliminated. But there's still value to even if you take a couple units out of the picture. And it hasn't really cost you anything to do that. So this is an extreme example I'm showing here where, hey, I move all the way over here and they can't do anything. But there's value to even the lesser, you know, even when you use it to lesser extremes, basically.
So saying that, do you feel like, you know, the bigger army you play, this tactic, it's not such a big deal anymore?
Like if you play 2,500 points or something?
Whatever you
Yeah, I mean, if your board is full of models. Right. Sure. And part of the balance of the game, yeah, I mean, don't play 50,000 points on a 6x4 table because it's not going to work. So, yeah, I mean, that's true. Playing the larger the point game, this would tend to go down. But for 1,850 to 2,000 points, which is pretty normal in the U.S. anyway, 6x4 table works fine. Like that'll be fine.
Because I'm kind of surprised when you're talking about this stuff, you didn't even mention the terrain at all until he brought it up, and it's like me, I'm a pussy. I hide behind the damn terrain, you know, and I'm like, don't steal my initiative, and then I always gotta, I screw myself. I always gotta like move out of that to get shots, and then hope that distance when they're moving up is enough that hopefully I'll be able to assault. And
well,
so,
I mean, this is independent of all the other things you would do in the game too. So this is just an example of, hey, here's the line deployed all the way across.
Yeah,
So.
and I don't think it really matters if you're playing 2,000 or 1,000 or whatever. If you're putting your 2,000 point army against his 1,000 point army, because his is spread out like that, you know, you have the advantage. I don't care if you're assaulting or shooting, you still have the advantage.
It's true.
A general thought is taking in consideration how fast your units move. I mean, just try to keep them close enough to each other they can support each other. The Dark Elder in this case are all fast enough to support each other kind of wherever they're at, whereas the Orcs just aren't.
Yeah, well, definitely stay together if you're going to do the refuse flank, because the whole idea is to have local strength, even if globally you're weak. The idea.
If you play a larger or slower army, is there a setup to think about to try and keep this from happening?
Well, so deploying your shooting unit centrally is one thing we touched on, or some on either flank. That will ensure that they can't be taken out of the game, no matter what else happens to the rest of them. Also, another thing you can do is have, like, let's say this mob is deployed pretty much in a block, right? You could deploy it more in a line so that they're covering more of the board edge. And in that case, it'll be easier to get that mob into combat, you know, and therefore pulled across with it. But there also is an inherent weakness there in that if I charge one corner of it, not all your guys are going to get to fight because then you're strung out too far. So it's sacrificing strength to make sure you're more likely to catch somebody. Yeah, so there are certainly things you can do as a slow army. But yeah, basically, you know, deploying shooting units centrally, trying to ensure maximum frontage for your units, and making sure that, for example, you don't put all your fast units on one side. Let's say that there was a bunch of trucks, you know, you had like 5 trucks full of guys, and you put them all on this side. Well, if I rush that side, then, you know, all the slow units over here will be left out of the fight. But if you've got, like, you know, truck, slow unit, I'm not going to be able to do such an extreme maneuver to cut out those guys.
So I think it's a good idea to alternate when you deploy. You try to break it up.
Well, not always. That's just one example about how if you're worried about somebody doing this to you, then that's one thing.
You're making it, when you're set up first, you're kind of making a guess.
Yes.
You know, so.
And this is how the game is balanced, so that the player going second isn't at a huge disadvantage, because what they do with their deployment can counteract a lot of the damage that will happen in the first shooting phase. That's just kind of how the game is balanced.
Like I play Horde Nid, and I would essentially set my Horde in the middle, go forward, and then I'd have stuff out front. You know, I mean, that's just a tactic with Nid. They're so slow. If he deployed his whole army out over here, there's no way I'm going to get to him, but I have the Gene or whatever else outflanking that's going to either force him to deploy more towards the middle, or take the attack on the Gene stores.
Want to go to the next one? Got a lot to cover.
Yeah, I think so. I think the next one is then still you, but we're just talking about, defeating, deep striking armies and what kind of deployment strategies we have with that. And I just want to give you a minute to set up. One of the items I know is